I will do as much as possible before I say a single word. I will collect every asset. I'll even do tests of the maps. I'll have everything downloaded. I'll know exactly what I'm gonna say, because the more that I have prepared ahead of time, the better the video will be.
Phil Edwards' explainer-style videos are just as odd and meticulous as the topics that he covers.
Pantone, turtle soup, porta potties, Fabergé eggs, Civil War, balloon core.
I feel like I'm watching like an OCD crafts person, just like making perfect things.
I think good storytelling is definitely about like having little carrots that are just beyond your reach that you're kind of, want to grab for and get to.
Phil started a trivia website, and off of that, he pitched his way into a job at Vox, where he worked for 8 years. As the company leaned more into video, so did he.
So now I sort of think of video as like my super hobby and writing as still being my job, but video is like this hobby that's got like steroids in it for me.
But the thing that shines through his work is his commitment to craft.
Your job as a solo creator is to say, where's the space that I can tell a story that bigger people just can't? Bigger companies just don't have the ability to.
I sat down with Phil to dissect his creative process and discover how prioritizing research and story create his idiosyncratic work. Phil, welcome to Digital Spaghetti.
Thank you.
Psyched to have you here.
Yeah.
What can you tell us what we're watching today?
Yeah, this is a video that I think the title is called Phil Edwards Vox Age. This is an early video that I did on my channel that was sort of inspired by Google searches that I ended up noticing. And unfortunately, a lot of them were curious about my age. So
Okay.
wanted to help with the mystery,
Well, let's kick it off. Here we go.
Quibi. Every morning I have a routine. I wake up on the floor of my office.
Okay, I'm gonna pause right here.
Okay.
There's so many shots off the bat.
Yeah.
You're cutting on action. You're looking to the side, changing camera position, and then you're punching in. Let's watch that sequence again.
Quibi.
So like here, I'm assuming you're using the same camera for the top and bottom shot.
Yes, in the first shot, I'm very glad that the camera doesn't fall off my fan. It's on my ceiling fan.
Hanging on your ceiling fan?
Yeah, with like a Joby Gorilla Pod. And so I was like, I'm half nervous that like this will be how I die when like the camera falls on my head. But yeah.
What are you actually filming with?
I think at that time, I don't know if this is a bit older, so I don't know if this is an A7 III or A7 IV, but usually I just use that, and I have like 16-35 lens, and I keep myself to one lens to avoid too many decisions and neuroses. So
I do that too.
Kind of it.
I have a 16-35, and
Really?
I love it. It's kind of I use it on a EOS R and a Canon, but
Yeah.
it's basically as A7 equivalent for Canon, and I really like that setup. It's great.
I just know that like if I were left to my own devices and I had like an 80mm lens, like I would want everything to be like that, and I'd want there to be like 1 pixel in focus in the background. And like that's just my like stupid idea of what looks beautiful. So I'm like, all right, let's just keep it at 16-35, 2.8 or whatever, and go from there.
Constraint breeds creativity. I love it. I will say you strike me as somebody who has an OCD approach to like filmmaking, composition, shots, like even the composition here with the bottle out of focus, narrow depth of field, like the shot of the body here, like all the lines are symmetrical. The shot's very squared off. Like it seems like you put a lot of attention into like shot composition when you're thinking about storytelling and production.
I mean, I would say like with constraints, like I've been on shoots where people will take an hour or an hour and a half to set up a shot, and the shot ends up looking great, but I just don't have a production cycle that allows for that. So my philosophy is to just try to do the best I can and then move on immediately and then iterate and improve the next time. So that's kind of what it is. So, there are things that I would critique about this shot. Like, for example, the camera's tilted a little, but, at the time, that was just, how much time I had to do it before like a screaming baby returned into my house or I lost my filming location to vacuuming or something like that. So
is there, are there lights that are just set up to film the whole thing, or are you just using natural light?
I think for this one, Sorry, I'm having an unappealing pause here because I can't actually remember for this one.
I was going to say, Phil, that pause is really unappealing.
I think I dragged a light up actually for this, and I don't know if you can really even notice it, but I think I dragged it up for this and maybe for the shower because I wanted the shower to be a little less ugly.
Let's get to the shower.
Take a shower.
I mean, I think you're right because you can kind of see the reflection in your glasses.
Yes. yeah.
Right.
So I think if I did that now, like, I would do it way differently. I think if I did that now, I would probably amp up the light from the window more, obscure the window in the shot, and then somehow have a strong bounce coming from the window onto me so that the lighting is more motivated. But, I just had to get in the shower for 10 seconds for the joke, so that's what I did at the time. But yeah, that's how I would do it differently, I think. But
when you think about something like lighting and shot composition and spending any time at all, I mean, already in the first 15 seconds of this video, I would say that this is like, it feels more produced and hi-fi than most of the stuff that I see on YouTube. And I know maybe you would beg to differ because you see all the flaws, but this does feel like just a higher level of production value than I think we're sort of used to seeing generally.
Well, that's nice. I mean, I just want to in this piece too is so narcissistic that I just want to earn people's time a little. And so even if it's not necessarily by mixing up the shots a lot, I do want to try to prove to people that I've invested a lot of time in it. And a lot of the time that will manifest itself through research or animation. But when it's a video that's about me, I try to shoot a lot for it. So
is the first 30 seconds is it earning people's time? How do you think about the intro of the video?
I mean, I'm pretty formulaic in that I try to have a teaser that just surprises people and hopefully intrigues them. I've seen some of the other guests on your show who'll use jargon about retention and improving AVD and stuff like that, and that's not really my vibe, but I do think a flashy opening is fun for people to see.
Does that mean you're not obsessive over analytics and you're not looking at first 30-second retention? You're not trying to quantify your way to storytelling here. You're just going from instinct and narrative sensibilities. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not that I'm averse to analytics. It's just that I think that there's so much data that it's difficult for us to analyze it in a meaningful, scientifically significant way. Looking at some graph and seeing somebody dip or fall, I don't think that you can make meaningful conclusions from that. And also, I think it's more important to surprise and kind of delight people than to just keep them hooked. So I've had digressions in my videos where I go off for 30 seconds and I do something just because I think it's funny. Because I just think, what's the point if you're not trying to do something cool? Why are you bothering?
Right.
You're just making content at a certain point. If you're totally hooked on a graph,
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, you're making for the outcome instead of making for the making.
Yeah. And I Google.
Okay, so I mentioned cutting on action earlier, but every time I see a really well done cut on action, I have to just call it out. Right here. Right? You're coming off the screen and then you're coming down here again. How much are you thinking about? How much of that is anticipated in your script? When do you actually come up with that idea? Is it while you're shooting? Do you take those notes in the script? Do you plan that out in your head? How do you execute something that is that smooth and kind of produced by yourself?
I mean, in this case, I just knew that I wanted to build a sequence. And I think that anybody who edits their own videos, as you know, or as I learned very quickly, editing on action is so much easier. So you want to have coming into a frame or going out of a frame or something that brings it alive in the shot if you have the time to execute it. So I think on this, I didn't storyboard it or anything. I just knew I wanted to build a little sequence to set up the premise. And I Google myself.
Okay, can we talk about sound design for a second? I actually love that sound. that we just heard.
Yes, that's your standard sound library, probably starts with a riser. A lot of them are too electronic-y, but, and then probably a bass hit following that, I imagine, which I often will forget to use, but, helps kind of get you out of the music and into the next scene of it all.
And do you do all the sound in Premiere?
Yeah, pretty much. I pretty much use only Premiere for sound and stuff like that. I lack the natural talents of some of us for music and sound design and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm pretty much in Premiere and Audition.
Does it grind you a little bit to watch your old videos? Does it kind of hurt a little bit? It seems like you're as you're watching this, you're thinking of all the things you would do differently today.
Yeah, I pretty much hate every video except the current one or maybe the last one that I did.
Really?
So, yeah. So, with, some exceptions.
From a quality standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint, what you just find yourself critiquing it naturally, or what's the feeling?
From both. I'm dissatisfied with story elements, and then I'm also dissatisfied with a lot of production elements, execution elements. But that's what I like about it. There's so much room to grow. I had a very constrained time frame for making this, but I'd been doing video stuff at least what is nominally a professional level for 5 or 6 years. And I'm still awful at it. So there's so much room to get better, which I love about it. It keeps me stimulated to keep going,
Yeah. I think it's the curse of, or maybe it's the flip side of when I was saying, looking at your videos, I feel like I'm watching an OCD craftsperson just making perfect things. And again, when I see your videos, I'm damn, this is very well produced. Even this shot, going out of focus to being in focus, there's so many little things in the way you cut it, the way you light it.
This shot is literally, I had one corner of my basement that was available for me to do stuff for about a year. And then I was
but we would never know. It looks like it looks great. It looks like a production facility. I think though the flip side of it is what it feels like to us versus what it feels like to you. The reason you do all those things is because everything feels imperfect to you. And so maybe you're just kind of constantly seeing those imperfections and they're just grinding you.
Yeah. But it's healthy. It's not
Yeah.
I don't bite my nails or anything. It's pretty good.
Gonna go on chat roulette. Oh God. $50? 50?
Yeah.
55.
55?
3-4 يعني 50.
50.
Uh, 48.
Did you know that they were going to be guessing 50?
You know how a good video producer would be well, we actually interviewed 300 people. Most of them thought it was 25, but found a few gems and thought it would be good for the story. It's no, they all thought it was 50. They all legitimately thought it was 50. I don't know. I had a lot of facial hair, this is 2020-ish.
The stash does age you up a bit.
Yeah,
a good stash,
and gray hair. I get it. I'm not offended, but no, they were really all like that. Yeah, the Russian guys drinking vodka in the shot.
And so is this section legitimately filmed after the chat roulette sequence?
I think so. Yeah, okay. I think I probably did this.
So you're actually disappointed dealing with your mortality here.
Yeah, I try to capture those moments of mortality dealing on camera whenever possible. I was hamming it up a bit. I don't care.
I'm 37. A boyish 37, I've been told.
Okay, so maybe everybody's just Googling my age because they're...
Okay, this is an interesting cut right here. I love this sequence because we hear your audio before we see you speaking.
Okay, so maybe everybody's just...
I don't know. That just... Something about that feels really nice, where you hear the dialogue come in before we actually see that you're the one speaking. And
I do think like a J or an Elcut, you know, like I do think those are ways to sort of up your production level when you were too lazy or too busy to do it in the field. Like because I only have one shot there. In reality, there probably should have been an extra shot, but I do think that it gives you enough interest that it makes it a little more compelling. You know, it's like a way to cheat it.
How do you know how much to cut and when to cut? Like, what is the pacing? Because I would say the other thing about your videos is they generally feel a bit more patient than other videos on YouTube. So, like, it's a mix of, like, injecting things like Elcuts and smash cuts, etc., but also having some patience for your audience. What is your own sense of, like, when do you actually cut? When do you add something? When do you inject complexity into the edit?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is probably based on, like, when I had coffee before or after the shoot. And if I was very tired that day, like, there are real reasons. Like, I did one shoot recently where I was, like, kind of hyped up, and I was like, oh, it's kind of nice doing this at night. I talk a bit faster. I'm not quite so laconic, you know? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's just, I probably inevitably mirror what I watch, and I'm not watching the super fast paced stuff.
What do you watch? What are you watching on YouTube?
I watch a lot of people. I watch a lot of camera YouTubers and stuff like that. So I'm big fans of them.
Like the Peter McKinnon kind of world?
Yeah. Gosh, you know, some
Potato
of them.
Jet?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I was gonna say him. I love him.
Yeah, it's amazing.
There's this. I feel bad almost invoking this person's name because by saying that I watch their stuff, it's like clearly it didn't work because I'm still so bad at my stuff. But there's this cinematography guy, Lewis Potts, who's out of, I think, Australia. And he talks about like motivating your lighting, and he's helped me improve a lot.
What do you mean motivating your lighting?
Well, like in this shot here, like I think that we kind of know that there's a window in the room. So I guess the lighting is sort of motivated here. But it might be good to flag off my shadow side so that there's a little more contrast, so that it's a little more visually interesting. These are thoughts that 90% of the time I don't have time to do it, but just having his voice in my head or other creators in my head is really helpful.
Have you always been interested in storytelling and movie making and cameras, and has that always been on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I always liked movies and film, but I'd say I'm primarily a writer, and when my job kind of shifted to be a video person, I developed it. And so now I sort of think of video as like my super hobby and writing as still being my job. But video is like this hobby that's got like steroids in it for me now. That's sort of how I think about it. Yeah.
Interesting. So the writing is kind of the thing that you feel like is your core focus, and the video sort of supports the writing.
Well, I love the video. I love the animation, but you know, I make these videos on the side on a really tight time frame where it's in my spare time, and there's often a bi-weekly cycle. And so I had to make choices. What am I going to be cheap on, and what am I going to be expensive on when it comes to my time? And I always said, okay, story and research is the thing that I'm never going to cheap out on. The research will always be the definitive take on this topic on the internet. You know, no Wikipedia, no copying, you know, wikihow.com or whatever, you know, like primary sources. I will always value that, and I'll always try to value the story.
Primary sources. You're like getting primary information.
Well, it's really easy these days to get primary or close secondary sources. You can find so much online that we're in this like new era. Like it's way easier than it used to be. So, yeah.
So a lot of the time then is like investigation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I front load the research and writing so that my scripts can be as good as possible. And I do try to make them very visual scripts. And then really it's just the back end where I'm doing the shooting, the editing, and the animating. So, you know, ideally I will have more time to do all those steps because I do value them. But like the priority is the research and the writing, even now. So when I am able to devote a bit more time and my workflow is a little better, it's still the research and writing has to come first for me. So,
but I think there was also some generational thing going on. Like, oh, is this guy a boomer? Is he a Gen Xer?
You punched in there. Do you shoot in 4K?
I do, yeah.
And you edit in 4K, so you can punch in without any quality loss.
I shoot in 4K and then I export in 1080. Or well, I shoot. Sorry, it's like so dumb. I shoot in 4K and then I edit in 1080 and I export the 1080 file in 4K, just as like a lie to YouTube. Just, you know.
Why do you do that?
This is sort of a common thing. Like there are rumors, you know, it's like one of these, you know, these internet things where you're like hearing what animal spirits are telling you. There are these rumors that you get a higher bit rate if you export your video in 4K and YouTube sees that stuff is 4K, they make your stuff look slightly better. So I've just done it on autopilot for years. I have no idea if it's true.
What a hack.
Yeah, I don't know.
I never even heard about that.
Could be totally fake. Who knows? But
all right.
I want to show you a chart. Do you see how there are all these cycles charted on this? These are supposed to...
I want to pause here because we're 3.5 minutes in. And now it feels like we're getting to like the meat of what you're trying to say here. Like you're teaching us about generational theory and how we perceive generations and how generations perceive the world. But we don't really get there for 3 minutes. So can we talk about like structure and arc and just what, like how you make the decision about like when to get to the meat of stuff? Why don't you jump in with some of the meat of stuff? How long do you make that first bit to kind of get us excited and engaged? How do you think about the overall structure of the video and the timing of the components of the story?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super formulaic and I'm open about how formulaic I am. I always have a 3-act structure. I always have a teaser and a conclusion that kind of bookends it. And in this case, I knew that people would likely come to the video because they wanted to know how old I was. And so I wanted to deliver that at the end of part 1. So it's kind of this balance where I did want them to get through to part 1, but I didn't want to tease them the whole video. You know, I could have left it till the end to reveal that I was 37 or however old I was at the time. But I didn't want to do that, you know, but I did want to deliver something interesting to them and hopefully have them hooked enough that they're wondering what is the rest of the video going to be. So that, you know, it's kind of that balance. But yeah, I'm pretty formulaic. I mean, I'm always doing that, and part 1 changes, but part 2 is often the meat. And then part 3 is usually just kind of like my take on it or why I think it matters. I'm very straightforward with it.
So part 1 is like the fun, exciting, engaging hook into the video that sometimes sometimes it doesn't necessarily even like relate directly. Like we may not even know what the video is about in part 1.
Yeah.
Part 2 is the actual like dose of education. It's like the vegetables. And then part 3 is like your analysis of it. Is that it?
Well, part 1, in many stories, you need context to understand the actual answer, in my opinion. Because if I've selected a story that is rich enough to be worth your time for 8 or 10 minutes, hopefully you need some context to really get what is going on. So, you know, in this case, I don't really deliver context because it's also a story about me as well as about this topic. But sometimes part 1 will be a zoom back, and then you'll kind of get to the actual answer in part 2. And then part 3 will be that sort of reflection and bigger scope of what it means. But I try to make sure that I'm not just sort of jerking you around in part 1, for lack of a better word. If there is a simple answer, I will hopefully give it to you in part 1 and then say, but there is further complexity that will be introduced later on. So that's something I've been trying to do lately because I don't want to waste people's time when they're getting into the story, but I do want to intrigue them enough that they'll want to learn more. So hopefully that works. Varies by the story though, but.
That's what Strauss-Howe did with their generational theory, which is really just kind of made up. Honestly, this is just a hot take. And really, a take as hot as this is not safe without medical supervision.
So, question. Do you write out the entire script for a video before you shoot it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because that's a big block of text. It's very clearly articulated. It's like, And then do you memorize the script before you go in to shoot it, or are you looking at it on your computer there? Like, how do you actually deliver the lines?
Yeah, I'll typically look at it on my phone or on my computer and just try to do the best I can. I mean, this is one of the critiques. I would say that this section is too verbose. It could have benefited from another visual here. But I didn't do that. But but yeah, I will typically write it all out. There will be a 2-column script. Sometimes I'll have a straight up shot list that's a checklist on there.
2-column script?
Yeah. So I'll typically just have the voiceover or the dialogue in the left column, and then in the right column I'll have the visual, which ideally will be manifested via some sort of picture. Since it is a visual. So it'll either be the piece of archive I want to use, or I'll cut and paste an old shot of myself to know, okay, I need a fill shot here, so that's kind of how I do it.
Got it. So you kind of map out, I mean, it's not a storyboard, but it's like almost like a script plus a storyboard then.
Yeah, I try to get as close as I can to a storyboard without too much time investment.
And then do you do any other prep work before you go into production, or are you just like, okay, I'm just going to execute this script?
Well, these days I will do as much as possible before I say a single word. I will collect every asset. I will even I'm doing some stuff with maps now. I'll even do tests of the maps and make the maps. I'll try to have everything totally done. I'll have everything downloaded. I'll know exactly what I'm going to say, because the more that I have prepared ahead of time, the better the video will be. Because like in this script, there are doubtless chunks of like 3 or 4 lines, which means it's bad. Like each in this 2-column script, there's sort of the columns, but then there are the rows, obviously. And if there's more than like 5 words in a row, that means that I've gotten lazy and I have not done my homework on trying to think of a different visual or trying to think of something to be happening. So, this one has a lot where my editor brain would say, okay, let's try to cut this down a bit.
That brings us to today's sponsor.
Have you been hesitant to let your unsubstantiated takes out into the world because of your lack of knowledge and expertise? Are you telling people you aren't qualified to share an opinion? Hot Take gives you the confidence you need to go viral. You'll feel comfortable talking about entire disciplines with half-coherent arguments that enrage experts just enough to spike engagement numbers. Soon, you'll be tweeting more than ever before.
There were some people gardening in the background. I felt really weird shooting this whole thing, but just ignored them. So.
Are those just like fun sequences that you just kind of brainstorm during the writing process? You throw them in there just to like take some air out of the balloon for the fun of it?
Yeah, I just want to indulge myself sometimes, and that's it. There's no meaningful reason to it. Like sometimes it just seems like it would be fun.
Yeah.
So
yep.
that's the only reason.
So go ahead and imagine that this river is a year, that this rock is the year that you were born in like 2011, because everyone else in the world is incredibly young. And this rock is the year that I was born, 1983. The year is the river. It runs over all of these rocks, but each rock has a totally different perspective on what actually happened. This is how the camera looks from one rock, and this is how the camera looks from the other rock. Birth cohorts are a way to express the idea that people born in different times see the world in different ways. They have different experiences that shape who they are and how they act.
Okay. That was such a good explanation. And you're obviously, this is a totally non-visual idea that you're describing, but you're grounding it in something that just makes it's such a good visual metaphor to explain the idea. How did you come up with that? What were the ideas that you considered using that you threw out? And like, why did you land on this one?
There's honestly, like, I was a little proud of having these new galoshes. It's like, how do I get to use my galoshes? That's like, there may actually be an element of me being proud of owning galoshes, because I think I'd like just got them. But yeah, I mean, I did just want some tool to explain this, because I did recognize that it was so not visual. And, a lot of this is, in this video, I just wanted to have fun and get out of the office, get out of my room or whatever, and have an excuse to go places. And so all those things kind of combined, and I just thought it would be cool to go somewhere scenic that was near me, you know? So it was all just those personal things in reality, and then just figuring out what fit the best to tell the story.
Yep. Great.
That's not the same river where I am right now. And that river isn't the same thing either. I'm old enough to remember when Tommy was the Green Ranger. Hadn't yet discovered the power of good. I'm old enough to know that it is very possible to be out of touch. And I'm old enough to be 37. Or maybe a couple years younger.
35.
Hey!
Okay, so do you consider that part 3?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think part 3 probably started with Ryder and with the river, in that case. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then ideally, you know, and then just by having this go back, this isn't quite the teaser imagery, the teasers with the bath and all that stuff. But yeah, this is kind of giving us that image again to return to that and think about that a little more. So yeah.
The thing about that last sequence is that it has a different tone than the rest of the video. It feels like, and I think it's the music. The music just makes it feel like, it sounds so not deep saying this, but deep. The music like makes it feel really deep. And what you're saying is profound too. But I guess the question is like, when you want to really make a point, like, and it is something that is, you know, either poetic or deep or whatever it is. How are you deciding what music to use? Like, are you just scrolling through music until something feels like it hits you emotionally, or like, why that track? Because that track is so perfect in that sequence. How did you find that? And yeah, how do you think about music in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I think just a lot of looking around and a lot of reviewing stems can be helpful if a track doesn't work for you on another level. What's important to me, the problem with, I'm sure you can relate to this, like the problem with finding music is that so much of it is too much that's available on music services. It's too cheesy, it's too emotional, it's too sad, it's too happy. It's not in this sort of subtle, tasteful world. And so that's where most of the time gets invested. And what's important to me with this is like, if I do get a little serious, I want to make sure that I'm like undercutting it somehow with lighter imagery so that it's not too pretentious, you know? Like that's the hope at least.
Which is what the sequence is at the end.
Yeah. And also just like mentioning, you know, feeling guilty about watching Barney when I was 11, you know? Like that's something I've had on my chest for a while, and it's not a deep thought, but feels good to get that out there, and you know, maybe some people can relate. No?
I didn't watch Barney, but I watched Sesame Street.
All right. When you were too old to watch it, or?
No, I was probably pretty young.
Okay.
But I did, I don't know. I got plenty of guilty pleasures. Thank you so much for coming in and hanging with me.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
This was
for
super fun.
Watching the video too.
Yeah, heck yeah. Amazing, and hoping to see many more.
Sweet. Thank you.